Okay, so the book that we read, I guess this month or past couple weeks, was The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Um, and yeah, that's a picture of him that I pulled up, and then a picture of the main character, Holden Caulfield, or at least a representation of him. So just to go over some basic characters that we see throughout the story, obviously there's Holden. Do you mind going back one?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. He's the catcher. He's 16 years old, and the story begins when he's recently expelled from Pensy Prep for failing his classes besides English. Um, Phoebe is Holden's beloved 10-year-old kid sister. Allie is Holden's younger brother who died of leukemia at age 11. DB is an older sibling of Holden's who is a writer involved in Hollywood. Mr. Spencer is a character that we see at the beginning of the story who is a history teacher. And he's kind of prompting Holden to maybe try and do things a little more deliberately with his life, and is worried about him and finds Holden's behavior a little confusing. And then Sally Hayes is Holden's love interest that he frequently confuses as well. And they frequently get into tiffs, and he brought her ice skating and they didn't have the best time. So yeah. So initial thoughts about the book. Is anyone confused, heavily inspired, annoyed, or feel as though they're looking into a mirror? I think one of the reasons that this book is so famous yet ambiguous is because it captures a lot of things that we can empathize with, but things that also maybe bother us about Holden and the way he behaves. The author generally avoided the public eye, but admitted this book was largely autobiographical. He was described by his peers very diversely as sarcastic, regular, quiet, thoughtful, and always anxious to please. There are a few critics that attribute his tone and point of view to his experience as a World War II veteran. In a way, he is a post-war rebel, young, crude, and misunderstood. According to Salinger's sister, growing up in a Jewish family, experiences of persecution, the confusedness of being part Jewish and not a whole, of being loved by an Irish Catholic mother, but denied by a Jewish father for his failure to take up the family food import business, may have attributed to kind of his ambiguous behavior and a lot of his fickleness in just regards to his moods and so on and so forth, which we see quite a bit in the book. Kind of a phrase that I really liked that as I was doing my research just about this novel, etc., was it's an autobiography of alienation.
You retrying. It was not about innocence.
So there is actually not really a direct association with history or ideology in this. There we go. So I think there is some confusion just because there is not really history associated with the book, but a lot of people speculate that maybe some of the attitudes during the time in which it was written have to do with just Holden's personality and a lot of the things that he does. And so we can start by thinking about Joseph R. McCarthy, also known as someone that was kind of the forefront of the McCarthyism age, with paranoia associated with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He had a list of 205 communists within the State Department. And we can think also about the Cold War era, with behavior and sentiments including mistrust, passive aggressiveness, hostile neutrality towards the world, and a deliberate detachment from society, generalization, establishment of rules, need for authority. I'm sure that some of these phrases or words you're hearing now, you can think of a few scenes in the novel that remind you of them and kind of manifest in Holden's behavior. He was also, the main character at least, was very preoccupied with duplicity, had this sort of psychic imprisonment in which he was thinking so much and feeling so judged and simultaneously judgmental that he really kind of narrowed his ability to be able to understand the world around him, even though he wanted to understand it so much. And his monologues kind of, you could divide them into examples, generalizations, and disillusionment with rules. So authority figures that seem to be pretending to be something, or people that weren't necessarily admitting that there was a tone under a situation. It felt very caricatured to Holden. The funny thing about The Catcher is there is no true connection between Holden and ideology, as I said before. There's one critic, John Seeley, that claims that Holden exists without ideology, but could largely assist in the development of an ideological viewpoint. So this book, in a way, has kind of acts as a match for a lot of people, that it ignites a flame, and that it doesn't have an ideology that Salinger really put forth or wanted you to believe in, and so it can be interpreted in a massive number of ways. And it's very heavily emotional and individual, so it's very accessible for an individual person to interpret in regards to their own life.
Check the markets. Actually, I'm taking one.
Okay. So these are some words that I thought described him well. If you look at reviews online, there is a large and interesting dichotomy between people that absolutely love this book and people that absolutely hate it. So he is a boy that is haunting, familiar, annoying, empathetic, inspiring, depressing. And then what else? A lot of different words can describe him. So this is a criticism of his personality by a critic, Alfred Kazim. The novel appeals to the vast number who have been released by our society to think of themselves as endlessly sensitive, spiritually alone, and gifted, and whose suffering lies in the narrowing of their consciousness to themselves. So if someone perceives themselves as being almost so spiritual or so intuitive that they isolate themselves from others because they think that others will never understand them. And that was a criticism that described maybe why Holden feels so isolated, which is very valid considering that the story is perhaps told from a sanatorium, which is hinted in the book. I guess Holden ends up there at the end. And then considering it was published in 1951, the popularity is possibly attributed to outrageous humor, which I'm sure that a few of you probably stopped and laughed at quite a few things that he said, and sexual scenes, and then kind of a counterculture hero or Pensy prep dropout. Who is he? He's kind of both in a way. And a lot of counterculture people often are degenerates in society, to use a harsher word, or people that kind of fail at what is considered to be contributing or achieving things that are perceived as successful. And then what's with the phonies? So kind of a good definition I found that, and this is a word that he frequently likes to use, is authority figures and the like disinterested in admitting their shortcomings, a world where anyone willingly prostitutes, markets, or promotes themselves to achieve a societal acceptance. Something like a charlatan, only everyone seems to be in on it except for Holden. And I guess his kid sister.
A guilty verdict.
So he does really love his kid sister. Phoebe may act as a representation of what Holden believes to be authentic or true. She is not a phony, and he desires to be the catcher so as to maintain the innocence that he knows she will eventually lose, the innocence that he is reluctantly in the process of losing. So Holden is very, very recalcitrant in regards to growing up and wants to maintain his childness, and doesn't like the way that adults live and portray themselves to the world. And I think that's why he gravitates so heavily towards children. And then we can think of that also with Allie as a loss. So Holden's deceased brother will perpetually represent innocence and youth to Holden, as he will never grow up. Holden is fascinated with his brother and holds on to his memory as an aspiration, life ideology, love of innocence, and a beacon of authenticity. So to Holden, children are individuals that are the most authentic and the only authentic people to him. And that's maybe because they act on their impulses, or they do things that they want to do, and they say why they're doing it. Whereas Holden struggles with really understanding how to differentiate behaviors in adults and how to understand what underlying meanings are. And he doesn't really like that there is that secrecy there. He thinks that it's a lie or fake in a way.
This is a test.
So this is actually the song that the book is based off of, or at least the title. And Holden misinterprets the lyrics or doesn't remember them. And we learn this when he sneaks back into his apartment in New York and finds his kid sister and is telling her that this is what he wants to do. He wants to catch children in the rye. Um, and his kid sister essentially tells him, well, no, you're saying the song incorrectly. It's this line. And we can read, he remembers the words as, you know that song, if a body catch a body coming through the rye, which you can see in the lyrics here. I think it's meet a body. And then just a little bit about the person that actually wrote the song, Robert Burns, considered the national poet of Scotland. His poems often discussed farm life, regional experience, traditional culture, class culture distinctions, and religious practice. I think maybe Salinger picked the song deliberately because Holden perceives it to be about saving children and whatnot, but the song is actually about casual sex. So it's kind of this ironic thing where it's a juxtaposition that we also see in Holden's life, where he's looking for innocence and profound interactions with people, but his misinterpretations almost like lead him into thinking that superficial things can be profound, etc. So that's largely something that he has a problem with. And I think Salinger uses his misunderstanding of the lyric as a metaphor for his life and his struggle, which is kind of sad in a way because his intentions are actually so profoundly beautiful when you see his mistake he made and what the song actually means. And I think that's why a lot of people empathize with him and really love him. Okay, so then this is kind of just a artistic figure that I'm a fan of. I didn't really find any critics that compare Holden to this, but I find that it is something that may be relevant to us now, considering our recent confinement in the pandemic. And Holden does this throughout the story, and he's almost kind of looking for this emotional meaning throughout the places that he goes. And the title, or I guess the cover of the book, is the merry-go-round, and so Holden kind of travels to different places and tells Sally Hayes as well that he just wants to drive to Vermont randomly and go leave and just get away from everything. And it makes you wonder what this desire is and have people noticed it, and what is this escapism. And there's actually something called the flaneur, and this is a concept of Charles Baudelaire. And it's a figure of modern artist, poet, a figure keenly aware of the bustle of modern life, an amateur detective and investigator of the city, but also a sign of alienation of the city and of capitalism. This was once considered unproductive, somewhat seen as a retaliation against the ideas of the Industrial Revolution, of progress, the unimaginable act of doing nothing, which I think can be really relevant to us now, considering that we've gone from an extraordinarily busy life to one where we have to somehow maintain this busyness, but also not, and be okay with it. And so I think a lot of 19th century thinkers, so on and so forth, in regards to the Industrial Revolution, just this idea of progress and doing something every day with your life, came up with a figure where it was like, well, what about the exploratory and escapist part of ourselves that wants to just observe and not necessarily be a part of the hamster wheel? Roaming to Rome, considering modernity, fleeting ephemeral experience of life in urban metropolis, and responsibility of artistic expression to capture that experience. And I thought this was especially relevant to Holden just in regards to his living in New York, which is, a symbol of modernism and progress and city life buildings, lots of things happening and lots of things being accomplished. And here's a young boy that's trying to find himself emotionally in a place that is so much about and represented by industry and things that are very concrete and not necessarily interested in emotions. So this was a figure that I found interesting. And then those are some of my sources. And I included some pictures at the end. So I like some of these title pages just because you can see some of the scenes and his hat, his hunting hat that he is so fond of and likes to hide in. when obnoxious students in the dorms are trying to bother him while he's reading. And then this is a young J.D. Salinger and an older one. That's a picture of him during wartime, and then that's kind of an interpretation of him as a catcher. And I wanted to mention as well that Salinger was very disinterested in being put in the public eye and was very reluctant to sell any of the rights to the book. And so there's actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Jack Nicholson that have really been interested in doing more in regards to film adaptations of The Catcher in the Rye. But Salinger was not interested for the most part in things like that. So yeah.
All right.
I thought we could just discuss or whatever if you guys wanted to.
In 2010, Special Prosecutor Kelly Secret was busy preparing her case.
I think some of my probably more favorite scenes. Let's see.
Word in those boxes. And as I read the evidence, the trial transcripts, and sat down with the witnesses, I realized there was a lot more.
If you guys have any scenes you'd like to talk about as well, I have my book on me. But I think probably one of my favorite encounters was just when Holden kind of brings his sister around and wants to talk with her and whatnot. And even though she's very reluctant to answer him because maybe she doesn't understand what he's saying, a lot of the book's meat in regards to its meaning is kind of embedded in the conversations that they have.
With those type of stab wounds without his hand slipping down on the blade and cutting himself.
Sebesta believed very, very strongly that there had to be 2 or 3 killers. Why couldn't one man all by himself kill leaping baby?
I think Otto's typing.
Yes, we're watching. Elizabeth wants to know who's watching a true crime documentary.
Oh, is that my dad?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if anyone knew that John Lennon, not to be dark, but John Lennon's shooter was actually reading the book and wanted to become Holden Caulfield and use that as the reason for assassinating John Lennon.
Dang.
Yeah. So the book has a very strange effect on people, just because he is such a fickle character and can be so empathetic, but at the same time, it's kind of the idea, are you trying to defeat the man by smoking a pack of cigarettes or training for a marathon and becoming a doctor? It's like, which route do you take to succeed in society and to assert the things that you want? And so I think Holden is probably an example of the first option, where he wants to be dysfunctional and so on and so forth. I think you're muted, Dana. Is Dana muted? I think
Dana's muted.
Okay.
I think everyone's muted except for your dad.
I wanted everybody to hear the crime drama.
Otto says, do you think if grief was worked through for Holden instead of buried, he would have been mentally healthier?
So that's a really good question. And I think that relates a lot to Salinger's experience maybe in the World War. And perhaps it would have been, just because I think when he lost his brother, he thought that in that event for him, there was a loss of innocence, and maybe it wasn't addressed well. So he became stuck there in his trauma. I know that nowadays we learn that when people experience traumatic events, they almost become stuck in that place, and they can't go beyond it because it almost like embedded their brain in that period of time, in that emotional place that they were in. And so I think that maybe his dissatisfaction and the way that he didn't believe in the world was because of the death of his brother and his obsession with innocence and people lying. So I think that's a really good point.
Otto also says, was it a sign of the times?
Was like kind of his obsession with innocence.
So, regarding the last question.
Otto has good questions.
He does have good questions.
Yeah. So that's a very good point, Otto. And I think that a lot of people struggled with that just because in the 1950s, there was kind of beliefs that maybe we don't have as much now. And so I think especially with a world war environment, that you were taught to toughen up because that was the only way to survive, which is understandable in a way because coming up with ways to survive seeing such horrible things can be difficult for anyone. Yeah, yeah. And children teach us so much. They act on their impulses and they can be immature, but I think that we can also act on our impulses and be immature, but we don't like to say so. So it's kind of funny because you wonder if we should just be more honest with each other and admit, hey, you know, I want an ice cream. I don't know if I can see let me see the chat. Oh, I see it now. Oh, thank you, Karen. It is iconic and it's strange, I think, especially considering the time period. It actually was not well received at first. And a lot of people, I think we talked about it briefly, but the language and kind of the sexual references, etc. Yes. And we wonder why they fear expressions of honesty. Is it because it makes us feel vulnerable? Because a lot of people, I think, judge Holden, right? So it's like you're not successful, you're not accommodating what life tells you to do, which is to go to school and get good grades, and then to go to graduate school, and because then you can really quickly be called someone that's not doing enough and not doing enough with your everyday life. And I think we can all agree and empathize with the idea that we struggle with that, and it's hard to keep up. Which is why maybe counterculture is so fun. If you've ever been to Soma, San Diego, and go in the mosh pit.
I was typing again.
Yeah. Let's see. I figured out how to do the chat.
Nice.
Sorry.
Danielle.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just thought it was so interesting, like random things, like how he obsessed about the luggage, and he went on and on about the roommate he had.
Yeah.
And how it became an issue, and they had to each wanted a new roommate, and then how when he was in the coffee shop with the nuns, he was fixated on their luggage. I don't know. I was curious what your thoughts were just on the writing and just the analogies and the way he fixated on that.
I think
one thing.
I think he perceives that everything is caricatured and that people are pretending. And he, you know, I think with really sensitive people, for example, if I think with the luggage is if you have a nicer piece of luggage than someone else, for him it was just like he could not ignore the fact that this meant so many things in regards to him having nicer things, and what is this person going to think in regards to me being better than them. And I just think he was so emotionally aware that he took someone for who they were and really like looked and saw who they were, and didn't want to drink the Kool-Aid and pretend that, you know, he was a part of a system. And so his disinterest with the system almost made him like scrutinize things too heavily. So it was like, you know, why is this person like picking up my frame of and picture of Sally Hayes so much? And he doesn't floss his teeth or wash his face, but he picks at his fingernails. So he finds meaning in everything. And I think that might just be because he's emotionally intelligent, which, let's see. Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good point too. You know, we it's kind of that actually can be very profound because we can ask ourselves, is it good to judge a book by its cover in regards to, you know, if you're doing it in a way that's not negative, or can it be something where we actually allow ourselves to actually see people and look at them and have an interest in getting to know them in that way? So yeah, thank you for that, Otto. Lots of fear and desires to connect, and you know, I think that this book is so strangely relevant. I guess I feel that way about a lot of books I've read, but this one in particular, relevant to now because we speak to each other on the internet and there's a lot of disconnect. Let's see, where he makes a reference in being in a mental hospital. I read the rest of it as if he was hallucinating or in a dream. Yeah, yeah. A lot of literature actually plays with that, where the perspective can be a little foggy in order to maybe take some credit away from the narrator, and it subconsciously opens up your mind into perceiving things in a much broader way and less literal. And also considering the fact that the main character is in a sanatorium, we kind of wonder about his credibility, and also considering kind of the things that he decides to do with his time. But yeah, I mean, it is very dreamlike in a sense, and we can even wonder if his mental state, you know, Salinger was suggesting that he was in some sort of like mania or whatever, and was kind of acting just stream of consciousness, which is another genre I actually really love that everyone should check out, stream of consciousness. But yeah, I definitely think that this could be thought of as that. We could wonder if this is even real to him.
Yeah, that was a lot of it that kind of went back and forth with, okay, was this really real stuff, or was it just things he was manifesting and putting down on paper to, and then kind of tied it all together to make a story of, you know, he had the innocence was in the back of his mind somewhere, and he was just trying to justify everything else by having all these other thoughts. And
Yeah.
I mean, I related to a couple of them, I mean, just from experience. And you know, but then like a lot of it was like I kept going back to the, okay, he's not all there. But now that what you said makes sense, that it's kind of the literary style of putting you off guard from the beginning.
Yeah.
And which, you know, most literature or film, like, I mean, you're kind of I go in with a blank slate anyways, but when in the beginning they kind of set that this is where it's from, I was like, okay, that caveat of it's not just narrating sitting in a cabin in Vermont or anything. It's just him in a mental hospital, and this is where it's all coming from. So
yeah. And probably indicative of the times as well. I think in a way, we're very lucky to live in the time we do now, because a lot of answers are given to us, whereas just the kind of scientific method they had to use in regards to life during wartime. And I mean, just having those massive wars where you just question, what is this life about? Why are there so many people dying? Why is it that things are not working the way that we're told they're going to work? And it makes us wonder about our perspective and kind of what actually are we seeing when we experience things. I mean, can a human being really conceptualize something like New York individually? Just because that is such a gigantic thing to put in our brain and to understand, and just the sheer amount of space and kind of numbers that we are told to conceptualize and accept as normal life is very different than what we could call our natural world, or forest, whatever. And I think I saw. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, you can find different types of literature, or literary theory, I guess, where some people really like to read stories in the context of the author and what the author went through. And then you have people that don't like to do that, and they just like to take the story as it is. And I think this book operates differently when you do that, depending on the perspective you take, but it also leads you to conclude the same thing in a way, where there is some sort of trauma for Holden. And maybe that's why he talks about baggage so much, as Dana,
Yes,
So
yeah, I didn't even really think about that.
Yeah. This book, I love it because every time, I think I've read it 3 times now, just because when you don't read something for a while, you forget, but you find things that you didn't find before. And I think the luggage thing is one of them, actually, that I noticed this time around. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, just the writing of it, I just thought I don't really know if I've ever read a book that has such interesting writing, the way he was trying to picture his mom or his aunt using the basket, and how long just all the details of it, like his aunt wouldn't have done it without her lipstick on.
Yeah.
And I just found it really interesting, the way the details and the way he got into comparing who would actually endure being able to do it. Like something so random like that.
Yeah. It's safe to say that people were shocked by this book, I think. And still are, which is funny. They teach it in schools, I think. I'm not sure if it's at the elementary or middle school level, probably middle school, I'm trying to remember. But I mean, the perspective in the writing was very hard for people to swallow, I think, just because he can be very forward, and he goes against the grain in a way where he just puts everyone under the microscope and says, why are you acting like that? And why are you so rehearsed, if they even are. So that's another thing that's kind of difficult, is how much are these people who he is judging, are they rehearsed, and is he judging them unfairly or fairly? So it's ambiguous in that sense, where you just don't really know who is actually doing what. And Holden kind of makes it seem as though everyone is in on the secret except for him, which can be very isolating. Yes, it is very edgy. He's this is a big I think, and maybe we can realize this as well when we consider that Leonardo DiCaprio multiple times has tried to appeal to making this into a movie. He can be seen as kind of an edgy counterculture actor who likes to do things that kind of are very profound to people. it's edgy, and I think that it suggests that there needs to be some sort of change. So yeah, I think that it has that effect. And I think in general, when something is so fickle and all over the place, it can confuse us because it makes you realize that life in a way doesn't have a direct trajectory, unfortunately. Who narrated it? What do you think?
You know what, Danielle, are you okay if people want, when they have a question, you can talk? Because I like hearing everybody, if it's okay. Is that okay with everybody else?
That'd be helpful to me.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you say what you were writing, John? Otto, I want you to know I can't even read. I have to put my face onto the screen to read when people are typing.
I just figured out that there was a chat on here.
Yeah, I don't know, but
I
hope it's okay.
So I think, okay, cool.
So what I typed was, why do you think he didn't want it made into a movie?
I don't, lots of reasons. I think that he thought that was what the phonies would do. Right? Maybe. It's when they were watching the Lunts, and he thought that the responses were too good, which I've actually had that thought in a play where someone is so well acted that it's like it doesn't represent real life to me, because I find a lot of real life to be just kind of awkward with awkward pauses that don't feel natural, and I think maybe he thought that the phonies would make it into a movie. Yeah.
Or that the actors would change it in their own way and change his work and be a layer of them being a phony and not representing his true essence of it.
Mm-hmm. And I also think Karen made a good point. The other side of this personality is that it can come off as and very well be snobbish. And so maybe he did feel like he was too good for it, and that he was above all of this caricatured behavior that he found so odious. Yes, that's also true too, Otto. The writer would lose control, perhaps. That's kind of a difficult thing about adapting things to the screen, is that they can be manifested in a different way than the author would like. And then I thought I saw a question, who narrated the book? So that could actually become a very conceptual and strange question, because it was Holden, but
no, I was specifically asking about the audiobook because
I see. Okay.
Just mentioned audiobook when I typed that in.
Okay. I don't know, actually. I didn't listen to the audiobook, but I'll have to check it out. Right. Yes.
I know, Otto, you made me want to check it out too, definitely. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, me too. Has to be a box office success, yes. Mm-hmm. The inevitable practicality of life controls a lot of artistic and emotional things that we would like to do. And yeah, that's true too. Holden did not like that his brother was writing movies. DB, he thought he was some Hollywood kind of like, fake guy.
Karen, share some of the stuff you've been typing in.
Hack.
What were your thoughts, Karen? I was interested.
Oh, I think Karen's muted.
Let me ask.
Okay, there we go. I think Karen still might be muted.
Karen, there we go.
There we go. I don't think he wanted it made into a movie because he didn't want to have anybody dilute his vision for the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
didn't trust anybody with it. It was, for us to be talking about this book so many years after it was written, he he held it tightly to his chest and didn't want to see somebody come in and him lose the control that he had by just leaving it the way it was, a book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or to trust another person to actually verbally say the words that he wrote. In his mind, he was seeing how it would play out as he wrote it, and so he probably didn't want anybody to invade his privacy in how he wanted this book to be portrayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that might be a reason too why it is so effective as a counterculture book, or ignites so many diverse and powerful feelings in people, is that the true function of it for him was for himself. And it was his way of expressing himself and talking about the strange life that he lived, and he had no interest in it being popularized in a way, or being something that people made into movies, or and it would just, if it wasn't his reality, it wasn't it. So I think that spirit of the book really is embedded with it very deeply, and I think you can feel it, and that's why the book comes off as being so powerful or just strange, is because it functioned very differently than a lot of things do that we read or that we watch.
It probably does spark fear in a lot of people because of seeing themselves or being fearful that could be them.
Yes. Yeah. And also wondering what it means to be successful, what it means to live your life and be honest about your life, what it means, I guess to accomplish things and to relate to people, because everything he does really challenges the typical ways that we like to do those things. And he's simultaneously has such a heavy desire for that, but really doesn't seem to get along with a lot of people. And so it's like, but then it's strange because you still don't necessarily buy that his methods are totally bunk, so to speak. I mean, the way that he's thinking about things, whatever, it's like, well, why does he still feel like, to me, someone who in a strange way is so legitimate and wants good things? You feel bad for him. I think actually Sandy, when she texted me, said, I feel bad for him. Let's see. Of a rose does not smell as sweet as it smells like popcorn and sweaty feet. Yeah. Some people maybe like the smell of popcorn and sweaty feet more than roses, I guess. But yeah, I think that the story is strange and unnerving, because maybe if someone is the type of person where they generally take things at face value and think, well, if I am nice and I play in the sandbox, whatever, I'm going to relate to people, so on and so forth. But Holden does the exact opposite, where he doesn't relate to people and challenges them and makes Sally cry after they go ice skating. But for some reason we believe him, or want to, if we like him. And the feeling is that, well, why do we want to believe him, and why do we like him, and why do we want to almost give him a hug in a way and tell him that his perceptions aren't totally incorrect, although they can be judgmental and a little bit slapstick. to say it lightly. Some of the things he said, I couldn't help. The first time I read the book, I was actually in the library at my college, and I just like laughed a couple times, and I think that people thought there was something like wrong with me. Because I was just like, some of the things that he likes to say, oh, it kills me, or something kind of, if he notices something and he just points it out, like about the movie where, I'm trying to remember what it was. There was a police officer or something, and a woman that sped too much and they fell in love, but she died in a crash because she was speeding, and he says, oh, that killed me. And it's like, well, it's like, that is kind of funny because, you know, she was speeding, and so she died from speeding, but he's so direct in regards to finding that funny.
Do we have any last comments or questions before we wrap this up? Not seeing any. All right, can I get a group picture of everyone? So we're all gonna smile. Everybody go. All right, in 3, 2, 1. All right, guys.
Danielle,
Yeah.
what book do you want to do? Do you want to do any more?
Oh, of course. Geez. I don't. I'm trying to think. What do I have over there? I don't know. Do you think Dostoevsky is too much? Have you guys heard of him?
Give us a little background.
He's a Russian author, kind of during the time that Russia was moving towards Western influence, and has a lot of. He wrote Crime and Punishment. I just read a bunch of his short stories. They're much heavier. So that could be something, or we could do Hemingway.
The Pearl.
No. Oh, by Stein.
When
Yeah, we could do The Pearl.
Okay. You gonna be on it, Mike?
No, not John Stein. I don't know.
I want you to know. I really want to have a live book club one day where we're like all together in real life.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Fun. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, The Pearl. Can you text us all like the book cover, what it looks like, Alexa, or you guys get it to us?
Can we include graphic novels?
Yes, I think so.
Why don't we do March?
We could. Or blankets, actually, would be nice. Would you want to do blankets? Or Persepolis, yeah. I kind of want to see people.
The background of what you're...
Oh, yeah, it's the house. I don't know. I kind of want like maybe everyone to say what they like, and then we can come up with it somehow, because off the top of my head, I mostly just go to books I've read in the recent past. And then Elizabeth had to read Steinbeck, it looks like, in school.
We could put a poll up on Facebook if people want to go on Facebook and comment what book they might want.
Yeah.
Or I'll send out an email. I'll make a note of that.
Otto, I read the book that you just wrote in. It's my favorite. I love that author. He's from Ireland. He spent 5 years writing that book. Like, I have it right around here. It's a true story. Did you see the book that Otto typed in? Otto, let me make sure I'm saying the same book of you. It's about two fathers and they each lost a daughter, correct? Tell me if that's the one you're talking about. Yes, that's my favorite, Otto. Right before COVID at USD, I went to a book signing and met the author of that book. He's my favorite author. I was so blown away that he spent 5 years in another country with those two fathers and like traveling the world with them. It's a true story.
That's the title and what Otto just typed, a paragon?
Yeah, the meaning of a paragon is that there's 8 sides. Otto, type in anything else you want to. It was so wonderful. I loved it, Otto.
Yes. I've never even heard of it, so that would be nice for me.
I liked how you wanted everyone to say what kind of books they like. I like, let's all do that really quick. Like, I loved that book that Otto loved because I really one thing that's nice is when you get to talk about the author like you did. You talked about the perspective of this author, and then that's what the story was incredible, but also the author is unbelievable. Like, just his dedication.
Yeah, I would love that.
So I think that's an interesting thing. It's
And
like,
he's from Scotland.
sometimes we just only talk about the book, but actually I love talking about the author as much as the book sometimes. What'd you say?
Oh, a paragon is a polygon with infinite sides before it becomes a circle. He said this guy's Scottish.
No, he's from Ireland.
Irish authors. Okay, so James Joyce is Irish, and for some reason they get so heavily conceptual. I love it. I don't know if anyone's heard of like Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake, but they just, I mean, that part of the world for some reason produces very interesting people.
But I have to tell you what touched me about this Irish author is that he got outside of his own country, which he wrote a lot about and was a best-selling author. And he just got really drawn into these two fathers. One was Israeli and the other one was Jordanian. And so their daughters were each killed by the other country's bullets. And one was, and anyway, so it was the most healing thing that this Irish author went outside of his own country's conflicts that he had written stories about and focused on another country's conflict. And these two fathers who, it's a true story, like endured, I love Otto Haver's perspective. Can you read me what Otto just wrote?
Even the numbering of the chapters was profound, loss transcends prejudice. Wow.
Yes.
Beautiful sentence.
Yes, I never read a book like it. I love that we both love it.
Yeah.
But the thing about that book is I love the book as much as the author, and that it's a true story. And could you read what Otto just wrote again? I loved it.
He said, even the numbering of the chapters was profound, loss transcends prejudice. Very nice. Maybe there's a poet in the making here. I would love that book, honestly.
Karen, what do you want to tell Danielle about books you like to read?
I generally read faith-based books. I like to, my vision is to kind of stand on the shoulders of giants that have won the battle.
Yeah. I feel the same about the authors I pick. It's like, show me how to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Earned wisdom that they give to us, which is really nice. But yeah, I mean, that sounds like an interesting book. I definitely want to look it up.
We'll definitely send out like a survey monkey or something via email to everybody. So maybe if you want to put your book suggestions in there and then I can forward them to Danielle, maybe we can do it that way.
Yeah, that would be great.
Dawn, did you want to add anything to the mix about the kind of books you like?
Honestly, I'm a psych major. So I like a lot of the psychological thrillers or like the darker that kind of stuff, or the anthropology books. I read Sapien, and that is a really cool book. It goes through like the entire human history from like very beginning, and then kind of looks at the development of society and why we are the way that we are, which was really cool. But it is,
that sounds really cool.
So
this club is kind of bad for me because I'm supposed to be studying for my MCAT.
Yep. Speaking of that, we do have to wrap up because we need to use this Zoom for another meeting that's happening at 30.
Yes, we do.
Thank you guys all for coming.
You guys.
Thank you.
Oh, Dune, but we are censoring him.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
Great job, Danielle. Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.